All right, it seems like the attendee count has stabilized for the most part, still going up a little bit here and there. But I think we are probably good to get started.
Ready to go? All right, let me get my notes in front of me here. Okay, before we begin, I want to note that this public listening session is being recorded. The recording will be distributed to task force members and may be posted online. With that, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second public listening session of the Mosquito Control for the 21st Century Task Force. My name is Beth Card. I'm Undersecretary for Environmental Policy and Climate Resilience at the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. I'm joined this afternoon by my colleague Caroline Higley, who will also help facilitate the session this evening. I serve as the Secretary's designee and chairing the task force, along with Vice Chair Kevin Cranston, who is the designee from the Department of Public Health. And for the session today, I will run through a few logistics, share a quick presentation on the current standing of the task force, and then we will open the floor to public comment. I will note that although you cannot see other attendees due to the webinar structure, most task force members are present today to listen to public comment. The purpose of our listening session today is to accept public comment on the task force subcommittee draft recommendations for comprehensive reform of the Commonwealth's mosquito control system. If attendees wish to speak, we are requiring that you sign up via the Microsoft form that is located on the webpage in your Zoom confirmation email and is pasted into the chat. When it is time for a registrant to speak, we will read out your name and then enable you to unmute, at which point you may begin speaking. If there's no response when we call you, we will circle around at the end of our session, time permitting, and try again. Speaking time, we respectfully ask is limited to 3 minutes. We have a lot of folks who want to speak this afternoon, and we want to make sure everyone has a chance, so ask that you please keep your time to 3 minutes. Finally, just a reminder that written comments related to this listening session will be accepted through Monday, February 14th at 5 p.m. One thing of note is that the comment portal is always and will remain open, so there will be continued opportunities for engagement there. However, if your feedback is submitted after 5 p.m. On the 14th, it gives less time for subcommittees to review and incorporate your thoughts into their process. So now just a couple of slides to set context for the work of the subcommittees, which I just want to spend a couple of minutes on. First, related to the legislation. An act to mitigate arborvirus in the Commonwealth was signed by Governor Baker in the summer of 2020. This law created the task force of 23 members and charged it with studying the state's mosquito control process via a study prepared for the task force, and charged it with recommending comprehensive reforms to the mosquito control system by the end of this March 2022. The subcommittee organization is as follows. In order to facilitate development of recommendations, we in the task force created 4 subcommittees, each assigned to the series of legislative directives as outlined on the slide here. The subcommittees have been meeting diligently since October 2021 to explore, discuss, debate, and prepare recommendations pertaining to their respective directives. And I really do want to pause here to take the opportunity to thank the subcommittees so much for their time and efforts throughout this process. It's a huge undertaking, and they have really put so much commitment, time, and energy into it, and they really have our gratitude. So in terms of the process for final recommendations, in January, the subcommittees shared their preliminary outlines of recommendations for full task force feedback. Through January, the subcommittees continued discussion to produce draft recommendations, which are the subject of today's public comment session. Please note that the subcommittees have not voted on these draft recommendations. They are under varying degrees of discussion and may not represent subcommittee majority opinions, so still works in progress. With the oral input that we collect here today and written input collected through Monday, the subcommittees will have another 1 to 2 meetings to incorporate feedback before they formally vote to advance recommendations to the full task force for discussion, debate, and final vote in March. With regard to the subcommittee draft recommendations, we're going to leave this slide on the draft recommendations on the screen as a point of reference for the rest of the listening session. If it's possible, we encourage you to be specific about which subcommittees and recommendations your comments apply, so we can be more efficient in our ability to turn around materials for the subcommittees to review promptly as they go through their process. And with that, we will head into the comment period now. So I will start calling on folks to offer your feedback. And again, respectfully request that we keep feedback to 3 minutes and look forward to hearing from all of you. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the works thus far. So with that, the first name on the list is Don Ogden.
Unfortunately, I do not see Don's name yet, so we can move back with Don after the fact.
Okay, thank you, Caroline.
And I'm also afraid that the next individual too is not on yet.
Okay, so the next person is Meredith O'Leary. We will make a point to try to circle back to her as well. Next on the list, Patty Page.
Great, Patty.
Hi, thank you, Bethany Card and Caroline Higley. I'm sorry, I missed your title, Bethany. I knew you with climate control and environmental affairs. I'd like to really reach out and thank Heidi Ritchie and Julia Blatt in particular. I think they've really fought a really hard fight trying to get some points across that I really resonated with me. First of all, I'd just like to remind you that the municipal opt-out guidelines aren't out for 2022. I'm sure you're very aware of that. But when they do come out, I would really ask that a reasonable time frame deadline be put on that, so municipalities will have time to try to push that through our Board of Health and our town selectmen and city councils. I'd like to ask about future municipality requirements. I'm not sure that it's clear yet. Is there going to be an option for municipalities to retain local control and not have a membership in a district, a control district, or is mosquito control district going to be required? And maybe it's a little too soon in the process, but I would support a local option for an opt-out or retention of local control. Throughout the process that I followed in the last year, I was really set back by the lack of current 21st century science. We heard things like pesticides are distributed like a teaspoon over an acre. We heard that it was an allergy equivalent to the consumption of salt. We also heard that in aquatic environments, the pesticides are diluted, so there's really no harmful effects on non-target species there. I didn't hear any science to back any of that up. But the last one was of greater concern to me. When the report came out, or the studies revealed that the chemically injured in the vulnerable populations were diagnosed as psychosomatic, I'd like to offer my own diagnosis on that. And it seems more like a gaslighting. Veterans of foreign wars, first line responders, particularly those that respond to oil spills, Exxon Valdez and Deepwater Horizon, a particular note with core exit, and the frontline workers and responders to the 9/11 New York City Twin Tower attacks, firemen, and all those people, veterans, first-time responders, firemen, are chemically injured, and they were marginalized and discounted. It's a large segment of the state's population as well as the country's population. And I really don't think enough work has been done on that. The subcommittee voted against hearing harm to human health. That was a big disappointment. The organization NOFA made an excellent presentation. I would ask that would be a mandatory, it's an hour long. I'd ask that be a mandatory viewing for the complete task force coming up in the future. There were 3 experts, and their testimony would be very helpful going forward to trying to finalize these recommendations. I know a lot of good work has gone into this. The one practice that I would support is the prohibition of aerial spraying. I appreciate the time here that you've given me. I hope these comments will be considered. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Patty. Appreciate the feedback. Next on the list, Barry Mclaughlin.
Yes, hi, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I represent the Chequesset Yacht and Country Club in Wellfleet, Mass. And my primary reason for speaking today was just to first and foremost thank Cape Cod Mosquito Control for their support over the years and helping us maintain, really mitigate and manage the mosquito activity here at the club. In 2021, we had an extremely unique year due to the pandemic, and then leading into what we hoped would be brighter days and being able to be outside and enjoy our area. That obviously was a major problem last year. We had mosquito infestation here in April, which was not something we had ever dealt with before. It was a very aggressive species of mosquito. And after some time, we found out that it was due to an overwash at Duck Harbor, just north of us here. And the salt water got in and stayed in an area and caused this incredible and unsafe situation that we had to live under. We tried to do what we could with repellents and things of that nature, but not only was the folks that came to our facility, to our club and in the neighboring areas, did they have to suffer through this, but coming out of a pandemic where they struggled to be able to come outside, here was an opportunity. And then they had great anguish being outside and had to then return back indoors for the most part. Our business was hurt greatly by it. So I support what Cape Cod Mosquito Control does. I hope they'll be able to continue their work and that they'll be able to work in our community, especially this coming season. We've been working with them to try to put some good practices in use, cleaning of our waterways to make sure that we have good water flow. So again, I just implore that we continue this work and a collaboration between Cape Cod Mosquito Control and certainly the National Seashore folks, so that we don't have to go through this matter again. So thank you for the time, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for your comments. Much appreciated. Next on the list is Sharon Dunn. Sharon?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, thank you very much for this opportunity to comment. I am going to follow right along with what Barry said. I'm a seasonal resident on Bound Brook Island in Wellfleet. Duck Harbor is part of Bound Brook Island, and the overwash created these stagnant pools. There was not only April, it was all the way through until September, October that these mosquitoes infested not only Bound Brook Island, but much of Wellfleet and much of Truro. It did cause anguish. People did want to be able to use have outdoor living, which was pretty impossible. And the area of breeding is really under the control of the National Park Service. The Cape Cod Mosquito Control Project has been wonderful in cleaning out the ditches and doing it as best as they can to help this problem. But I do know that many people in Wellfleet and on Bound Brook Island and in Truro have been using pesticides. to not simply larvicides, which is what the Cape Cod Mosquito Control Project has been using on the pools, but pesticides. And this is uncontrolled. People are using services. They're having being serviced every 2 weeks, sometimes every week. People are buying their own. So this is a situation that does need to be looked at. I'm hoping that the larvicide control this April will start this April and will continue on through this summer and will be more effective. But if it isn't, I am concerned about the super use of pesticides in the whole Outer Cape area. And I'm concerned about the effect on businesses, the effect on people's mental health. So thank you very much for giving me this chance to talk about this.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next on the list, Louise Hetzler.
Hello, can you hear me?
We hear you, Louise, yes.
Hi, Louise Hetzler, Westboro. I would like to speak about 3 local effects of climate change and 3 solutions. Climate change, in the form of severe droughts and floods, can have devastating impacts on humans, animals, and plants. Globally, it can even lead to pandemics. For residents of central Massachusetts, effects can be subtle. To most organic gardeners and nature lovers in Massachusetts, myself included, the effects of climate change are all too clear. 3 effects are particularly noticing and troubling. The first is the decline and, in many cases, the disappearance of birds, notably backyard birds, in all their beauty and brilliant color. The second troubling effect is the steep decline of monarch butterflies. The third troubling local effect of climate change and the misuse and overuse of pesticides that contribute to it is the decline of pollinating insects, specifically wild bees in the yard. The town of Westboro, Mass. Is a member of the Central Massachusetts Mosquito Control Project, and as such, pays to have synthetic pyrethrins sprayed from trucks all over the neighborhoods. In the last several years, heartbreakingly, each time the spray truck has come through my neighborhood, all my backyard wild bees have disappeared for the rest of the season. The last time the truck came through, my property was excluded and the bees still disappeared for the rest of the season. I have a huge mint patch taking up almost half of the backyard, usually filled with hundreds of honeybees, bumblebees, wasps, and other pollinators. I noticed many mosquito-eating dragonflies in my backyard in the summer of 2018. I was overjoyed. Then came the aerial mosquito spraying a few weeks later, and they too fell victim. In recent years, I've noticed the bees have been dwindling on the mint flowers. What is the solution to reverse the disappearance of songbirds in Massachusetts? Stop the spraying of synthetic pyrethrins for, quote, mosquito control, unquote. Garlic works much better against mosquitoes. Many birds eat mosquitoes and become poisoned by pesticides used against mosquitoes. Stop using chemicals on the lawn. Better yet, get rid of the lawn. Plant native plantings and organic gardens instead. As the Audubon bumper sticker on my electric car says, protect birds and you protect the earth. As for monarch butterflies, same solution. Stop poisoning them on their perilous journey. Let your yard be a refuge, a way station. As far as bees, let them be. Stop the mosquito spraying with synthetic pyrethrins, which is toxic to bees. Bees pollinate 60% of our food. Don't bite the bee that feeds you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise. Next on the list, Jennifer Brown.
I think that Jennifer is not here.
Okay, we'll
Yeah.
try to come back. Next then, David Brown.
Yes, thank you very much for the task force giving me the opportunity to provide some comments. I know some of the previous people discussed the potential lack of experts. So I really want to encourage the task force to reach out to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to have a good look at the plan. Certainly the vector-borne disease section in Fort Collins, they would be able to provide some very good advice on how effective mosquito control can and should be conducted in the area. Secondly, I really want to encourage the task force to look at the American Mosquito Control Association's best management document that was recently published and disseminated back in October and November of this year, or of last year, 2021. It can be found on the AMCA website, mosquito.org. It outlines the best management practices that should be conducted when you are performing an integrated pest management plan for mosquito control. We encourage everybody to use that. It will address, I think it'll address an awful lot of the comments that have already been raised relative to some of the concerns about mosquito control, because as has been, we've already heard, mosquitoes can be quite a problem. Not only can just the sheer numbers of mosquitoes be a problem, but obviously they transmit disease. So you want to make sure that you are incorporating best management practices when you're implementing an integrated pest management program. And lastly, I know there are always concerns on just when it's discussed about mosquito control in general. I encourage the establishment of thresholds, because the last thing you really want to do is try to control a disease situation when the disease presents itself, because at that point, oftentimes it's too late to be able to prevent any disease transmission to the human population. Many of these diseases are actually endemic within the wildlife population, and then based on the sheer numbers of mosquitoes biting the, let's say, birds, if it's West Nile virus, then that can transmit then to the human population. So I encourage the establishment of thresholds and that treatments be done to reduce the adult mosquito population before it becomes a disease transmission state. And because mosquitoes can fly, I know there's also concerns about aircraft, but I would strongly encourage you not just making a blanket statement that aircraft should not be used. Many mosquito species have very long flight ranges. And if you heard what I just mentioned before regarding just the sheer numbers of mosquitoes and the potential for disease transmission, sometimes a targeted aircraft application to sharply reduce the adult mosquito population is needed, and will actually result in less pesticides potentially being disseminated throughout our environment, because it's a very efficient way of quickly reducing an adult mosquito population, and it doesn't have the effect of having to have several applications, maybe by ground vehicles, that may not be as reliable or be as effective at reaching the adult mosquito population. But again, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment, and AMCA stands ready to provide any other comments for mosquito control as is requested. So thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Next, we have Skip Del Vaglio. Skip, can you try taking yourself off mute?
Okay,
There we go.
good afternoon. I represent the Berkshire Backyard Beekeepers Club in Great Barrington, and I live in Sheffield with my 12 hives and 10 others that I care for other folks in the area. And we have a situation in Sheffield. I think Sheffield is an old English word for swamp, because we certainly do have a lot of standing pools of water around. And I can testify to that. Beekeepers are significantly involved in the IPM management. And in our case, we're looking at mosquito applications that are favorable to the honeybee. And I can explain one that we use on our private property here. And I don't have the the specific formulation of it, but it references what the young lady said about garlic. And we had Terminex in the last 4 or 5 years spray our property with this garlic-based substance, which really kept the mosquitoes down and did not affect the honeybees. What we typically would do is if farmers were going to spray pesticides on their crops or their properties, we would get together with them to hope that they would do it early in the morning or late in the afternoon so that the foragers were back in the hive. And then we would cover the hives with damp cloths to keep the bees in while that happened. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. And like I say, this garlic-based spray, which I don't have the formulation for, did work very well for us in our particular situation here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Next, Lynn Greisemer, and apologies for the mispronunciation. Lynn. You might have to take yourself off of mute, Lynn.
And we're going to have a big list, and then we're going to break it down into subcomponents. So that there might, I know there's like lots of different opportunities that are coming up, and the more you know.
Hi, this is Lynn Griesmer. I wondered whether I might come back and talk in about 10 minutes.
We can certainly try to come back to you, Lynn. Yes, no problem.
That would be terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next on the list is Richard Callahan.
Not sure I see Richard here, unfortunately. Yeah, I think we'll have to come back to Richard.
Okay. Then next, Lynn Mann. And you might have to take yourself off of mute, Lynn.
I'm sorry. I forgot that I had signed up to speak. I don't really have anything to add right now.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much for being here. Next, Kristen Kennedy.
Same, I had registered, but no intention of speaking. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for being here. Mary Duane.
Unmute. Now can you hear me?
We sure can, yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'd like first of all to thank the task force for the opportunity to speak today concerning the subcommittee's draft recommendations. As I said, my name is Mary Duane. I'm the current president of the Massachusetts Beekeepers Association, and I'm the vice president of the Eastern Apicultural Society. And we're concerned, obviously, about the well-being of all pollinators within the state of Massachusetts and the country. I'd like to specifically talk about the best practices section of your subcommittee recommendations here. Let's see. First of all, we do believe that adjustments need to be made to protect the honeybees. First of all, the apiary program, MDAR and UMass should conduct testing after each truck and aerial spraying each and every time, before and after, to find out the effects of what's going on to both our native pollinators and to our managed honeybees. So we'd like testing to be conducted before and after. Also, beekeepers who sell honey in the state of Massachusetts, or bees or other bees related products, should have their bee yards exempted from spraying. I think that is critical for them to be able to opt out on spraying. Also, pesticides that are least toxic to pollinators should be used. I understand, done some research on this, that there are certain types of viruses are vectored by certain types of mosquitoes. And I think we could do a better job in the state of Massachusetts to target particular types of mosquitoes that are carrying the viruses that are causing us problems. So I think research should be done in that particular area. And probably really important, I just think there should be more communication with all these stakeholders, in particular the beekeepers. We need to know what's happening. We need to know when spraying is going to take place. So I think some better communication could be done via either the Massachusetts Beekeepers Association or our 13 wonderful bee club associations in the state. We'd like to get involved. We'd like to help out limiting the use of pesticides when all possible. So thank you so much. And we are available, the Massachusetts beekeepers are available to provide any information we possibly can. So thank you for the time to speak today.
Thank you very much for your feedback. Next on the list is Heidi Dallard.
Hi, thank you. I work with the Massachusetts Pollinator Network, which is affiliated with the Northeast Organic Farmers Association. And I'd like to echo the concerns that were raised, particularly for native pollinators and native bees. I think what I've read of your draft recommendations, you're definitely moving in the right direction. Very happy to see that, but I really think you need to go farther, and simply there should be no spraying of any adulticide that's a broad spectrum. Anything needs to be very targeted, and you have to be absolutely sure that bees and other pollinators are not affected. This is just essential to our basic ecology, to our ability to sustain life on Earth. And, it's really too bad that people in yacht clubs might be having a bad time, but they'll be having a worse time when there's no pollinators left to pollinate their fruit or things like that. I think they need to think a bit long term. I also think that private mosquito spraying outfits need to be very tightly regulated, and that, that it's really a big loophole in this if they're allowed to just spray properties whenever they feel like it, these pyrethrins. So I also want to comment that this whole mosquito spraying program is in direct opposition to so many other state programs that are looking to preserve our wildlands, our forests, our wetlands, our wildlife. This is not just a matter of getting rid of pesky mosquitoes. This is annihilating the basis of the food chain of birds, amphibians, of, small mammals. This goes beyond just having a nice day outside. I also want to express concerns about the opt-out program. I don't know a lot about it, but I know that many towns went through a fairly lengthy and expensive process to opt out, and then were summarily denied with no explanation. And I'm very concerned that a lot of small towns, or towns like mine, I live in Belchertown, simply do not have the wherewithal to go through a lengthy process, particularly if they think they have no hope of being approved. So I think you need to look at the expense of whatever process you come up with. So that is what I have to say, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much for your feedback. Next, we have Jean Lemieux.
Yes, am I unmuted now?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my name is Jean Lemieux, and I am president of the Massachusetts Association for the Chemically Injured. I am speaking today on behalf of the members of the Massachusetts Association for the Chemically Injured MACI. I provided written comments to the task force in May's listening session specific to the health effects that pesticide exposures can have on the chemically sensitive community, and the necessity of honoring a request for exclusions and opt-outs from aerial spraying and wide area pesticide application, even under a declared state of public health emergency. I offer feedback today on the draft recommendations and questions raised before this task force. Best practices, number 13, protect vulnerable populations. There are studies such as Dr. Miller's from the University of Texas Health Science Center and John Malot's study out of Canada, which specifically correlate chemical exposure with the start of an exacerbation of multiple chemical sensitivity. In another study by Dr. Ann Steinman on prevalence published in 2018, it was found that up to 12.8% of the population has a diagnosis of MCS, noting that the prevalence has increased over 300% in the past decade. That figure is up from the 4 to 6% noted in previous studies. The US Census estimates Massachusetts population July 2021 was roughly 7 million. Conservatively, 5% of 7 million is 350,000. 12.8% is 896,000. Massachusetts citizens is diagnosed with MCS, if Mass is consistent with the national study. A larger percentage is noted in the prevalence studies for those who report some level of chemical sensitivity. This group is shown by studies to be at medical risk to pesticide applications. Health effects. When studies, references, or questions that came before the task force, even from fellow members, exploring the health effects issue, was minimized and ignored by some on the task force. Those with chemical sensitivity, especially those with MCS, has specifically been mischaracterized and minimized by Mark Nescarella, Mass State toxicologist for the Department of Public Health. I quoted in my May comment from Ashford and Miller's book, Chemical Exposures, Low Levels and High Stakes, second edition. While published in 1998, it still is a go-to, authoritative, and well-researched book on the subject. Consider it an excellent reference. Yes, there are published studies and reports since that time, and I will provide some links to scientific work and reference documents, which will both be helpful and credible resources for the task force members. I will be sending that in written. I find it hard to understand a public health agent referencing such a biased set of references. I would expect a balanced selection. What was provided by Mark Nescarella as references was a page out of what the tobacco scientists, namely chemical industry, would make reference to. I find it very disheartening that the excellent work by the MCS advisory group that was formed under Suzanne Condon in the Education and Outreach Program has been ignored in the Bureau of Environmental Health's response to questions asked. Macy had 2 patient representatives on this advisory group. I know for a fact that the Bureau of Environmental Health had received other credible educational reference resources, and Macy has continued to do outreach to the department's Bureau of Environmental Health and to the Bureau of Infectious Disease. Research going as far back as 1998 indicating that toxicology is incomplete in assessing the medical danger of low-level chemical exposure was noted in a Viewpoint article by Ashford and Miller, Low-Level Chemical Exposures, a Challenge for Science and Policy. Once thought to be safe, there is mounting evidence that human exposure to chemicals at low levels can be harmful. The exposures are linked to adverse biological effects, including endocrine disruption, chemical sensitivity, and cancer. We are just now beginning to recognize the link between chemicals and new public health problems that challenge the tenets of traditional toxicology in medicine. How many of you looked at the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment document that had been raised by a fellow member of the task force? New research suggests, and I'm quoting, that the use of airplanes to spray anti-mosquito pesticides may increase the risk of autism spectrum disorder and developmental delays in children. And that was from the American Academy of Pediatrics Conference presentation 2016. Toxicologist Linda Burbaum stated existing US regulations have not kept pace with scientific advances, showing that widely used chemicals cause serious health problems at levels previously assumed to be safe. Local engagement, opt-out and exclusions. I urge that the task force's report reflect the public health perspective with regard to the potential risks that pesticides pose to one's health. Include recommendations for policy that is protective of those who are most vulnerable on their individual right to protect themselves from serious harm to their health. Honoring a request for exclusions and opt-outs from aerial spraying and wide area pesticide application, even under a declared state of public health emergency, needs your consideration. Thank you for the opportunity to comment in today's listening session regarding this important issue before the task force. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Next, Drew Tower.
Great. Hello.
Hello, Drew. We can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for providing the opportunity to speak. I am Drew Tower, Community Resource and Policy Director at Beyond Pesticides, a national nonprofit dedicated to educating the public about the hazards of pesticides and encouraging alternatives to their use. We at Beyond Pesticides are also proud members of the Mosquito Coalition, consisting of 15 local, state, and national organizations working to enact sound mosquito control that protects public health and the environment. I am providing these comments on behalf of the Mosquito Coalition and the residents our coalition represents. Mosquito management in the 21st century must shift away from a reliance on chemical controls that harm people and wildlife towards an ecological approach that prioritizes preventative measures. To that end, we are cautiously optimistic regarding the outline recommendations produced by the Mosquito Task Force. The development of a statewide mosquito management plan will provide consistency in administration and allow for a more substantive evaluation of efficacy. We support the repeal and replacement of century-old enabling legislation in favor of a restructured oversight board, and we wish to reinforce the need for independent experts to participate in this board. It is incredibly important, however, that any statewide plan include baseline surveillance and monitoring capacity for all communities in the Commonwealth and provide allowances for community choice. We support the recommendation for a menu-based approach outlined by the local engagement and policy subcommittees, as well as the development of an online system to track residential opt-outs. We support the need for additional oversight of pesticide products used in mosquito management. This approach will increase public awareness of pesticide risks, but stronger provisions are needed to encourage use of least toxic yet still effective mosquito management products. We likewise urge stronger measures to ensure that products containing PFAS are not used where they can contaminate rivers, lakes, and drinking water and harm Massachusetts residents or the environment. This task force is in large part an outgrowth of resident concern over the statewide practice of broad-scale aerial applications of adulticides across local communities without their approval. Therefore, we strongly support the Best Practice Subcommittee's recommendation to prohibit all aerial spraying in the state due to lack of proven efficacy and the risk of human and ecological harm. In place of aerial spraying, we strongly support the recommendation to develop a statewide education program and the local engagement recommendation to promote creative ways to engage the public. This approach will assist communities and mosquito control districts in lowering mosquito populations, thereby reducing disease vectors and nuisance complaints. By and large, we thank the 21st Century Mosquito Task Force for the hard work that has gone into producing these recommendations. We now call on lawmakers to incorporate these important recommendations through legislation that establishes Massachusetts as a leader in 21st century ecologically sound mosquito management. And on behalf of the Mosquito Coalition, we thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next, Gail Fee.
Hello.
Hello, Gail.
Hi, I'm Gail Fee with the Jaquesset Club in Wellfleet, and I just would like to reiterate what Barry Mclaughlin and the other Wellfleet residents said regarding the mosquito infestation on the Outer Cape this past summer. The outbreak in Wellfleet specifically was a huge detriment to our business, and the threat of mosquito-borne illnesses, EEE, West Nile virus, and Zika, was especially concerning to us as we operate a summer camp for children and have many elderly guests who use our facilities. Cape Cod Mosquito Control did what they could to address the problem, but they were stymied in their efforts by the Cape Cod National Seashore's licensing procedures. The area where the infestation began, Duck Harbor, is under the control of the Cape Cod National Seashore. The seashore did not give Cape Cod Mosquito Control permission to treat the standing water the overwash caused with larvicide until mid-July, after the mosquito outbreak had become out of control. Cape Cod Mosquito Control is currently attempting to get a permit from the seashore to begin treating these same areas with larvicide, and they are hoping to have it in place by March. The seashore has not decided yet whether they will issue the permit. I would urge the state to engage with the seashore and urge them to issue the permit to Cape Cod mosquito control so there is not a repeat of last year's unsafe mosquito outbreak. I'd also just like to add that I am also a beekeeper, and I agree that the unregulated private spraying for mosquitoes is not a good solution to the outbreaks. An ounce of prevention in the form of larvicide application in this case is worth a pound of cure in the form of unregulated private spraying. Thank you for letting me speak on this.
Thank you for your comments. Next, Marcella Stasa.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have been listening in to the subcommittee meetings as much as I can, and I do have to commend all those folks for really putting a lot of thought and consideration into the process. I appreciate what they're doing. I'd like to address a few issues. I will skip over the issues that were brought up by Heidi Dallard, who mentioned pollinators and the opt-out process. And Jean Lemieux addressed the chemical sensitivity issue, and I agree wholeheartedly with what she said. And then Drew Toher of the Mosquito Coalition, he also spoke directly to some of my concerns. I would like to support the notion of a baseline, a statewide baseline for services, which I don't think they need to be much more than testing and education at the very least. That seems like something that's very, very manageable and doable. And I certainly would urge you to consider a menu-based option for mosquito control districts, and I think there would probably be far more participation in the mosquito control district process that they have. But I largely want to speak for those of us who are gardeners, and I grow my own food. Pollinators are incredibly important for this process. Not only are the pollinators vulnerable, but the human beings are vulnerable too. I know many people who have had cancers. I don't know what, if there's a link between chemicals and their cancers, but it just seems like there's an awful lot of health issues that could be exacerbated or caused by some of these chemicals that are being proposed. And I'd also like to see if we could distinguish between like treating for disease versus so-called nuisance spraying. I would certainly prefer to see larvicide as a way of managing the mosquito population, but the spraying for nuisance control just to accommodate people's comfort doesn't seem nearly as important to me as doing so for disease control. So those are just a few of the issues that I wanted to touch on. I'd also like to say that of the folks who are on the task force, Heidi Ricci has spoken almost entirely in favor of things that I feel very strongly about, and I just want to give her a shout out and say that she's really done a good job in representing a lot of my concerns, and also to make a statement regarding our working on with science-based information so that we can move forward and take care of these, take care of this situation with as much information as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Next, we have Nancy Rea.
Hi, I'm Nancy Ray. Yes, I live in Woods Hole, a private citizen, and I have lifelong involvement in conservation and have listened very carefully to the legislative briefing that was given on 1/26. Terrific. You all, if you haven't listened to it, you need to listen to it. And I totally support the work of this committee and the bills that are proposed. That's all I want to say.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nancy. We appreciate your feedback. Next, oh, sorry, Caroline, go ahead.
Pausing really quick. I actually have been looking to see if the next couple folks have been registered, and the next 1, 2, 3, 4 are not present.
Okay.
If you'd like to read out their names just to acknowledge that they signed up, that would be great. Maybe we can move back.
Sure. Thanks, Caroline. So Dr. Lisa Nagy, Henry Rose, Jordan McCarran, and Rebecca Chain. So if we can circle back at the end if there's time, and we will do that. Which then brings us to Kathy Christopherson as the next on the list. Kathy?
Good afternoon. As you say, my name is Kathy Christopherson. I'm a conservation commissioner in the town of Ashby, and I'm representing myself today. So thank you for this opportunity to participate. My comments come from our experience of being rejected for opt-out last year, a result that was both upsetting and troubling for a town whose Board of Selectmen, Board of Health, and Conservation Commission had all unanimously voted in favor of opting out of involuntary aerial spraying of pesticides with or without PFAS. Our rejection was the result of a decision made at a regional level, despite our town being quite geologically different from the town where the one problem mosquito found 13 miles away led to our denial. So we hope that the work of this task force is correcting situations like that. Looking at the best practices draft recommendations on the shared screen here, for number 2, I imagine that includes truck-based applications. So I would say that I don't believe they should be done at all. And I say that as someone who grew up in East Freetown down on the South Coast, where we were fogged by truck, it seemed, every summer. I am aware of the Tripoli and West Nile concerns in that area, but eliminating truck-based application seems best when you consider everything else that is sprayed in that process. It always seemed quite a scorched earth approach to me, and listening to the previous commenter from Westboro seems that that is an apt description. For number 15 and 16, I'm concerned about the direction or perhaps the narrowness of your directive itself. What you showed earlier said protecting organic agriculture from pesticide use. So I wonder why you are considering only protecting commercial farms. Ashby is a town with many small farms who want and would benefit from protection. When the news hit about the mosquito control changes in that summer of 2020, that is who reached out to the Conservation Commission concerned about their crops. And so same with why are you only seeking to protect certified organic farms? Certification is expensive for small farms, so they shouldn't be penalized and excluded. Perhaps you can work to find a way to widen that category. In the policy structure there, number 1, I would be completely in support of repeal and replacing the current SRB and their process. In general, for mosquito control, please do what you can to reduce the use of pesticides, insecticides in our Commonwealth. Please do all you can to protect the vulnerable and non-target species. we should lead with education and other ecologically based management approaches. So I support number 6 there, prohibit aerial application of adulticides. We should not use aerial spraying of pesticides ever, let alone do that first. I really can't imagine a pilot can avoid certain areas or properties with marked boundaries, given wind and other externalities. For best practices number 5, I would be happy if we not only educated the public on good management approaches to reducing mosquito risk, but also educate on what is really in the so-called natural spray operations like Mosquito Joe and others, what they use and what the impacts of those applications have on all the other insects and wildlife in people's yard, not to mention perhaps their children and pets. I see their lawn signs every year and wonder if the homeowners really know what is being applied or if they're just victims of slick marketing. But here in Ashby, we are a town blessed with many wetland resources, including outstanding resource waters, some of which flow into other municipalities' public water supplies. So helping people reduce avoidable contamination would be a positive. I'm not sure if that's part of the best practices number 7 or a potential outcome of it, but that is something that needs to happen. I would also like to second everything the previous testifier from the Mosquito Coalition said earlier. So, and also thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your feedback. Next on the list, we have Roberta Flashman. Might have to come off mute, Roberta.
A minute. Hi, can
Hi.
you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. I'm in the public library.
We
my name
understand
is,
if you have to whisper.
it's okay. My name is Roberta Flashman, and I live in Ashby, Massachusetts. I've been a member of the Conservation Commission since 1988 and an organic gardener farmer since 1975. Thank you for taking my comments on this very important subject. I was the point person for Ashby's application for an alternative mosquito management plan required for a municipality to opt out of spraying conducted by the State Reclamation and Mosquito Control Board. I was mystified and dismayed by the denial of our plan. Upon further inquiry, we found that there had been a mosquito found in Pepperell, a town 15 to 20 miles from Ashby. It was this fact alone that disqualified Ashby from being able to refuse spraying to be conducted by the state. So my first question is, why was there not a listing of towns eligible for opting out of spraying? The town had the data, the state had the data and a plan for determining opt-out status. And yet they required towns, such as mine, which they would deem ineligible to opt out, to spend time and effort in applying for opt-out status. My second question is, why would a farm be required to be commercial and/or certified organic to be eligible to opt out of spraying? Many small farms are organic, but do not have the time or money required to become certified. And how does one determine if a farm is commercial? My farm is very small. I use no pesticides, no herbicides, no hormones, no fungicides, and no non-organic fertilizers or potting soil. Because I'm so small, I am not required to become certified organic. But spraying Ashby would destroy the value of my organically grown strawberries, peaches, tomatoes, horseradish, and fresh herbs that are sold at local farm markets and farm stands. All of Ashby is on well water. Some of these wells are shallow. What guarantee would Ashby or individual citizens have that their water would not be contaminated by needless spraying? The fact there is even consideration of triggering spraying based on complaints from residents is preposterous. This is especially true in post-COVID years with the influx of residents from cities where there are virtually no mosquitoes to a rural area like Ashby, where, rumor has it, Small children are at risk of being picked up and carried off by mosquitoes. That's a joke. I've never seen even a baby chick carried off by mosquitoes. New residents put out lawn chairs, imagining themselves sitting outside, watching children play and enjoying the spring sunshine. Existing residents just chuckle and shake their heads when they see this, knowing that the month of May has black fly swarms that will enter every orifice of your body, only to be followed in June and July by mosquitoes. But we know how to wear nets over our heads when we garden, how to fix screens on our windows and porches, how to properly dispose of old tires, or at least empty them of water, and how to apply insect repellent. Allowing these new residents to lodge complaints that might trigger spraying and destroy organic produce and aquatic creatures that make Ashby unique is undemocratic, to say the least, and completely unscientific. And how many residents' complaints will be enough to trigger spraying? And should any number of complaints be able to override the mosquito surveillance data that does not demonstrate elevated disease risk? The fact is, there are lots of wetlands in Ashby. Most of these are forested wetlands, and as such are usually quite a distance back from any roads. My understanding is that spraying from trucks cannot penetrate further than 200 feet into a forested area. So truck spraying would be quite ineffective in a place like Ashby. Aerial spraying is an inexact science at best. Marking corners of properties to avoid them in spraying is an unworkable solution. Mapping those properties to be avoided relies on the skill of any individual pilot or sprayer to identify those properties by landmarks or maybe GPS, and then precisely deliver or not deliver the chemicals accordingly. Pesticides are contributing to declining pollinator populations. Across the country, 28% of bumblebees and 17% of butterflies are at risk of extinction. In Massachusetts, there are 78 endangered or rare insect species listed. My neighbor struggles to have a successful beehive, but domesticated bees are not the only bees that visit my gardens. Massachusetts sprays pyrethroid insecticides. These are toxic to pollinators and other beneficial wildlife. But worse, they are ineffective at killing disease-bearing mosquitoes. Ecological methods to mosquito control have co-benefits like better management of floodwaters and reducing stormwater pollution. The Ashby Conservation Commission, the Ashby Board of Health, and the Ashby Select Board all agree that there should be no spraying in Ashby. You would think that Ashby would have the right to determine its own future. Let's hope this piece of legislation will make that true. Thank you very much for allowing me to comment.
Thank you very much for your feedback. And as we move on, I'm just going to respectfully request speakers to please try to keep your remarks to about 3 minutes so we can make sure everyone has a chance with the time that we have remaining. Next on the list is Dorothy Mcglincy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public input today. My name is Dorothy Mcglincy. I am the Executive Director for the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions. MACC is a statewide nonprofit organization that supports more than 2,000 conservation commissioners in all 351 municipalities. We work to protect and preserve wetlands and open space. First, I want to thank the 21st Century Mosquito Task Force for the hard work that's gone into producing these recommendations. Thank you also for the summary slide that we see today. I didn't see that previously. It will be very useful for MACC's specific written comments that will be coming in by the 14th. I also want to say a shout out to our friends in Ashby. Thank you very much for your comments. And MACC is also on the Mosquito Coalition, and we will be providing comments with that group as well. In general, we believe mosquito management needs to move away from the strong reliance and use of chemical controls that can harm people and, just as importantly, the ecosystem. We urge continued movement toward an approach that prioritizes preventative measures and education rather than reliance on pesticide products. MACC supports opportunities to reduce mosquito breeding habitat by removing dams and replacing undersized culverts to eliminate stagnant water and improve fish access into wetlands where they can consume mosquito larvae. In addition, we urge support for low-impact development techniques like bioswales and rain gardens to reduce new mosquito habitat, reduce flooding potential, and improve water quality. We support the recommendations for statewide mosquito management plan. This will provide consistency in the administration of the program and allow for better evaluation of the effectiveness of the program. We support the repeal and replacement of existing legislation in favor of a restructured oversight board with independent experts to participate on the board. We support the recommendation to develop an online reporting system so that pesticide application records from private applicators can be analyzed to understand the situation and develop possible recommendations for limiting use. As one of our board members told me, private applicators advertise heavily to homeowners and provide multiple regular scheduled sprayings on private properties, whether there's a mosquito problem or not, and whether the properties have drinking water wells or vegetable gardens. Additional regulation and oversight of pesticide application on all areas, but also in residential properties, is warranted. MACC will work with the Mosquito Coalition to have more specific comments specific to the draft recommendations, and we will submit them to the task force by February 14th. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your feedback. Next, we have Kim Doherty.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, thank you. My name's Kim Doherty, and I recently became aware of this task force through the Plymouth County Beekeepers Association. I'm a new beekeeper, but I have always been concerned about use of chemicals in the environment. So I'd like to thank you for the task force for addressing these issues. I think they're very important. I just want to make a quick comment about the best practices section of the draft. I agree that using an integrated pest management system is best practice, and all of those directives are really important to achieve an effective IPM. I agree that surveillance of the target population that is actually carrying the disease is really important, and that we need to create clear thresholds for spraying that are just based on the disease risk. What the last person just mentioned too, like online reporting to track both private and public applications. We need to know when, where, and how often these pesticides are being applied. Protecting our non-target species is key. That is so critical. We need to be aware of what it's doing to other insects, including pollinators, birds, animals, and also humans. I know a lot of speakers have already talked about these things too, but I feel it's important to say it again. The ability to opt out is important. We need to be able to make our own decisions in our own communities, in our own yards, and in life. And just to end, spraying pesticides should really be used as a last resort. Spraying shouldn't be based on it should be based on elevated disease risks, not just complaints of mosquitoes being a nuisance. They are a nuisance. I live in Marshfield. We have them everywhere, but there are other things that we can do to help manage that. Because the effects of spraying can have these long-lasting detrimental effects that the many speakers have already discussed. So I want to just thank you for listening and taking the time.
Thank you for your feedback. Next, we have Hannah Wilkins.
I don't unfortunately see a Hannah Wilkins, but I see a Hannah/Michael account that I am suspecting could be Hannah. If this account is yours and you are in fact Hannah Wilkins, you can feel free to unmute.
Hello.
Yes, we hear you.
Yes. Sorry for the confusion. This is Michael Farley, husband to Hannah Wilkins.
Understood. Please go ahead.
You. Yeah, I first of all, thank you so much for having the opportunity to speak. This is great. I was just thinking last year upon hearing of the spraying that I had not been given the opportunity to voice myself. And it is great to have had this opportunity passed on to me by the Bee Club. And I'm happy to be here. Happy to connect with all of you people. Thank you for hearing us. I think as a beekeeper, a gardener, resident of these woods here, because we are in the woods, we're in the swamps, we're in the wet areas, that we should restrain from all types of fatal interactions with these mosquitoes. There's no need to kill them at this point. I feel like we're seeing a large increase of their numbers due to the lack of spraying, which obviously had happened through these years where a lot of people were locked down indoors, sick, whatever. I feel as it is right now, it's a very vulnerable environment. And these are big systems we're talking about. These are large systems which take large amounts of time to settle and to equilibrate, if that is a word. But these populations of mosquitoes are not pests. These are basic food items to many, many important creatures on our ecosystems on this planet. So it's okay to take some time to see how this balances out. Other than that, I feel like our next acts of progress should be definitely towards local engagement, reaching out through bee clubs, things like this, schools, to get as many people involved on a local level as possible to educate, implement whatever we can in order to help stabilize these systems. Bats, eels, many things that consume these bugs are readily available to encourage their life sources. We at our garden here, we plant mountain mint and various other types of pollinators, and the population count for everything that consumes these mosquitoes has gone way up, where they're hardly an issue. We can do this in all of the local areas that do not have any kind of environmental stimulations, let's say an abundance of different diversity of plants and animals to help these systems proliferate and keep these mosquito populations down. So I think we can definitely implement as much as we can of our best practices, and our best time with all these people involved here today is to help educate and to grow some counteractive measures naturally. We do not need to be a burden upon ourselves to take care of these mosquitoes. They're not a problem. We can just let the natural systems grow and take care of these mosquitoes themselves, because it's a great food source. Let's not forget that. This is a very important thing, and we can tolerate that. It is but another thing of the pain of nature that we can tolerate. In terms of diseases and all the things that they spread, how is that any different than any of the diseases that are being spread all around us currently? We will handle it. We'll take care of it. We do not need to act with violence first and just bomb them with pesticides from the sky. No, we cannot pinpoint the locations that we're doing this. There's no need for it. So thank you so much for your time. I hope to continue to be a part of this in the future, a part of the dialogue, and a part of the volunteering or whatever needs to happen. We, the people, are here to help pick up the slack wherever we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ellen Fine is next.
So I just want to flag that I think Ellen is on here 2 times. I'm gonna allow Ellen Fine with capital E and F to talk, and if that's not the right account, I can pivot over to the other.
Okay.
Did we get you on the right account, Ellen? All right, we can try the other one.
Oh, now I see 2.
Here we go, finally. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I will say we do hear an echo. I'm wondering if it's.
I'll remove the other one.
There we go.
My computer, anyways, it's old. So my name is Ellen Fine, and I am the director of a few organizations. One is called Healthy Yards Needham, that shares with another group called Community Equitability Group Resiliency Gardens Project, another project called Pollinator Protectors. And we've been involved with this issue for a few years now, and certainly I've been involved with the pesticide issue since I first was made sick about 25, 30 years ago now. I often, when I speak at hearings, I give this crazy statistic that I'm probably the person who's most chemically injured in the state in terms of amounts of times. I've had probably about 35, 36 pesticide poisonings, often from lawn care chemicals, and care is an interesting word there. And the most recent one came from my neighbor's private use of True Green And they sprayed neonicotinoids and imidacloprid, which made me very ill with chemical pneumonia type experiences, damage to my thyroid and whatnot. But that's not the focus of what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk a little bit about what happens on Tuesday nights in Needham under the current mosquito plan. We are in the Norfolk County District, and on Tuesday nights in Needham at 3 o'clock, I believe the office closes. And at 3:30 is when they start posting what the streets they're going to spray mosquitoes, truck spray. It used to be Sumithrin Anvil, and now I believe they've switched, but I'm not quite sure what they're using now. Incidentally, Sumithrin Anvil 10-10-10 is a PFAS concerned product. And we were told for years that this is perfectly safe. And that's usually the case with pesticides. We're told it's perfectly safe because the company that manufactured it told us it was perfectly safe. Then there's all these independent studies and scientists and people like me who say, wait a minute, 36 times should mean something to somebody. Typically, it doesn't mean anything in Massachusetts. So once again, what happens on Tuesday nights? On Tuesday nights, upwards of 45 or 50 streets will be sprayed in Needham, starting as early as 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And what happened last year is some of our gardeners in the program I run, the Resiliency Gardens Project, had their streets sprayed 5 times over the course of the summer. Some people will call up, and I was told this by the person who directs the mosquito control project down in for Norfolk County or for the Norfolk District, said that some people will call up every week and request to have their yard sprayed, whether they really need it or not. So what I want to do next is I want to talk about the structure of this draft recommendations and see that, in my opinion, it comes from a very pro-pesticide viewpoint. I don't see the word organic on here anywhere. Nope, not seeing it anywhere. Now, if you look at best practices, improve consistency in the implementation, it could very well easily be switched to organic pest management. Organic is a different philosophy and structure than IPM. The two can overlap, but organic says we take chemically synthetic pesticides off of the table. So then in choosing a quote unquote pesticide selection, it would have a completely different outlook. And we wouldn't just focus on the killing of things, but the prevention of things. You know, things like removing standing water and things like that. So I think a couple other things that I wanted to say, whoops, I just lost. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Ellen.
Okay.
We are starting to run out of time a little bit, but please finish. Yes.
I just wanted to say that, you know, who I don't see on this committee is organic farmers, organic land care professionals, and the chemically injured, and health organizations and organic beekeepers. I think it's really important to include us more in this discussion. You know, and I think that so much more could be done in terms of best practices. Like so many other people, I think number 6, prohibit aerial applications, absolutely. And take chemically synthetic pesticides off the table. As other people have said, you have wonderful solutions in backpack spraying in garlic, cedar, rosemary. Some people use a little bit of lavender. And those kinds of things could be part of this mix, but nowhere do I see those suggestions. And many of the private companies do use those. Many of them, unfortunately, use toxic pesticide chemicals. I live in a neighborhood where 18 out of 25 yards uses some form of pesticides. One neighbor's absolutely unwittingly, 2 small children, they had 9 applications last year because one of the private companies, as Kathy Christopherson said, used that slick advertising. And I would call upon this committee to include more people from the organic world and have us help be the determinant of the best practices for private as well as public health. Thank you very much. And thank you to the committee.
Thank you, Ellen. Next, Caroline, I have Sharon Dunn next, but is that right? We had Sharon Dunn earlier.
Oh, that is a good flag.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So then next on the list that I have is Gwen Nabad.
Gwen does not appear to be here.
Okay. Then next, J. Gregory Milne.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can hear you good. You've done a pretty good job facilitating this. You're both better at technology than I am.
Thank you.
I am speaking both, excuse me, as a citizen, taxpayer, and as chairman of the Board of Commissioners of Cape Cod Mosquito Control Project, which incidentally was the first mosquito control in Massachusetts, preceding any existence of the Reclamation Board or any of these state-created controls relative to mosquito control. Just a little history there. I found it very interesting listening to a lot of the other comments. As you know, or I would hope most of the folks on this task force should know, I would hope they would know, that the local projects structures differ in different parts of the state. Our 5 commissioners, there's a separate piece of legislation that mandates 2/5 of the board has to be direct representation to our 15-member municipalities, essentially the 15 towns on Cape Cod. Barnstable actually has a city form of government, but 15 municipalities. We have a Cape Cod and Islands Selectmen and Councilors Association, and I am representing that group, and that is legislatively built into the structure. And then another of our members, Rodney Collins, is a town manager and a member of the Cape Cod Town Managers Association, and he is there representing that group. And that is statutorily required, that there is that connection to those regional groups that represent the municipalities. Also, we have always contended our board, and we've had a few changes of membership on our board over the years, but for the most part, it's a very consistent board. And we've all had the position that the municipalities are the origin of the funds. And I know the State Reclamation Board argues with us to that effect. They apparently deem it as state money. We see it as money on the cherry sheet. It's related to the local aid formula, and it is funding that the towns would have if not our mosquito control project is mandated by statute to be funded by those funds from the towns. So we consider ourselves representatives of the towns. Interesting to listen to many of these folks. It seems a large number, high percentage are environmental in their focus. There's an old saying, be careful what you wish for. I would love to express to this Mr. Drew Tower from this Mass Coalition, environmental nonprofit related to mosquito control. The nice woman, I didn't write her, or Dorothy Mcglincy from the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions. I spent 12 years as a city councilor here. They call it the town council because it's the Cape, but I was liaison to our Conservation Commission. I'm an environmentalist through and through. And I used to go to some of their meetings, the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions. The advocacy that many of these speakers are pushing is a statewide deeper control and complete takeover of mosquito control. And for some reason, they seem to believe that that's going to be the right road to take to get them to what they want, which is a greater environmental stewardship and ecological approach. That couldn't be further from the truth. Factually, we have experienced on the Cape for I've been on the board now for at least 15 years, maybe more. We have experienced in many, many instances, the state bureaucracy pushing us to be a one size fits all, to have this complete generic approach to mosquito control, namely to have our size of labor be shrunk dramatically in order to shift us to mandatory adulticiding. That can't be overstated. The state has been pushing for years for us to do adulticiding. We on Cape Cod mosquito control don't do adulticiding because we are locally controlled. 252 and the amendment that we worked very hard to get passed that helped to clarify our control, the commissioner's control over the hiring and firing of the superintendent and the management and oversight of mosquito control, that it's locally based. Our getting that amendment passed over a governor's veto by the wisdom of the legislature helps us in keeping our control, but all the while the state continues to interfere constantly. But my point is the statement of be careful what you wish for is these folks from the environmental community seem to believe that a greater degree of power relative to mosquito control on a state government basis, state bureaucracy takeover, even further than what is already in existence, is going to bring about a better environmental stewardship. It won't, because we can tell you factually, if it were up to the state, we would have been pushed into adulticiding and have less manpower and spend less money, because we are one of the most expensive projects out there due to the fact that we are in the business of water management. That's our focus. We only do larviciding because we are sensitive to the most fragile ecosystem and environment there is in Massachusetts. We have the most delicate.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just a reminder on time, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's
But
okay.
I hope the point can hit home that this effort and the repeal of local control is a mistake. And those that want to have the environmental stewardship and the ecological approach are far more protected under the current structure of where local control is the emphasis. And we here on the Cape are certainly, we're not doing any adulticiding, and all these environmental concerns wouldn't come up here on the Cape because we don't operate that way. We operate on the side of the environment and on the side of our member towns and on the side of public health. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Lisa Rigsby, please.
Hi, thank you so much. I kind of feel like I'm in a different world reading the summary slides. It's all boiled down to some very neat key points. And I've had the opportunity to listen into many of the task force sessions. And if I were new, like many of the people on the call today, I would be like giving thumbs up and saying, great, how wonderful this is. But having followed very closely the work that you've done, I'm concerned that it kind of is presenting sort of a glossy top line summary of the directives when there's so much more detail that has gone into this, specifically like IPM defining what our program model is, and the models that have been looked at and have not been looked at. Mosquito control districts, similar to what the prior person was saying about the Cape, centralizing and forcing municipalities to join a mosquito control district. There's so much talk about the opt-out process and moving it online, but there was a lot of discussion about renewal process, making it easier so one wouldn't have to reapply, guidelines in order for municipalities and individuals to opt out, clear thresholds and clear specifics on why an application would be rejected and the ability to reapply after. I would encourage anybody who's listening to this call to go and read the full draft directives, each one of them carefully, because I think there are a lot of details that this glosses over. I don't want to sound like a naysayer, but many of the comments that we're hearing here today were comments similar to the first listening session. And throughout the process, it seemed like those comments and people's concerns were largely ignored. And I have to give a shout out to Ms. Ricci for always bringing, and Mr. Hopping, always bringing back into perspective that this is about protecting public health and the environment. So I don't know whether all of the sort of corpus of your work will be presented, because it certainly seems good on this one piece of paper. And I can't help but think that it is sort of lip service to complete your work. Thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you for your comments. Rachel Jakuba.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Rachel, we can.
Thank you. Again, so I'm Rachel Jakuba. I'm the Vice President for Bay Science at the Buzzards Bay Coalition, which is a nonprofit membership organization dedicated to the restoration, protection, and sustainable use and enjoyment of Buzzards Bay and its watershed. And today I wanted to highlight a project that we worked on in partnership with the Bristol County Mosquito Control Project and express my gratitude for their support on the project. This was a project that served a dual purpose of reducing mosquito breeding habitat and improving salt marsh habitat. Salt marsh degradation is a significant issue around Buzzards Bay, and much of the marsh loss that we're seeing is in areas on the interior of the marsh that previously drained naturally. But now with rising sea levels, the water is staying on the marsh in these areas and killing the vegetation. Working with Diana Brennan at Bristol County Mosquito Control and her team, we're testing a pilot restoration technique called runnels. Runnels are small, shallow channels that drain these areas of standing water on the marsh. And Diana's support was absolutely critical to the project, both in facilitating permitting of the project and also her and her operators' expertise in the field. They were very knowledgeable about the salt marsh and its plants. They used low ground pressure excavators to make these small runnels, and I was really impressed with their ability to operate in a high precision way, very carefully removing only inches of material at a time. As soon as the runnels were in place, we saw water beginning to drain, and shortly afterward, we observed fish that feed on mosquitoes swimming in the runnels. The runnels were implemented about 15 months ago, and we've seen the areas where we've implemented runnels that the standing water has drained and stayed drained, reducing mosquito breeding habitat and allowing the marsh to revegetate. This innovative partnership, it supports the goals of the Buzzards Bay Coalition and the Bristol County Mosquito Control Project. And I really hope that the task force, in thinking about the future of mosquito control, thinks about not only engaging the general public, but also recognizes the opportunity to work with local land trusts, towns, and other organizations on synergistic projects that facilitate salt marsh restoration and mosquito control. I really can't say enough about the impact that Diana and her team had on this project. We would not have been able to execute it without her. And as I said, we're seeing, just just over a year, we're seeing the marsh starting to revegetate in these places, and it's really encouraging, and again, helping both the mosquito control project's goals as well as ours to improve marsh habitat. So thank you for this opportunity to provide comments.
Thank you for those comments. Next, we have Raquel Belial Toller. Sorry if I'm not saying that right.
I do not see this individual actively at the moment.
Okay. Then next, Charles Sumner.
Well, thanks very much. My name is Charlie Sumner. I served as the town administrator for the town of Brewster for 30 years. I'm currently the interim town administrator for the town of Wellfleet. Also, I served on the Cape Cod Mosquito Control District for 15 years, representing the Cape Cod Managers Association. Greg Mills, really made some wonderful comments, and listening to the comments tonight, I feel bad for a lot of communities off Cape, but there may be a problem there, but there is not a problem on Cape Cod. Cape Cod Mosquito Control District is responsive and responsible and locally supported and controlled. And I think Greg touched upon some of those points. There's a lot of the best managers practices, we do it right here on Cape Cod. And I'm very, very concerned about, particularly on the policy structure, changes that would take away that local control and our ability to serve our communities in an appropriate way. So this is not a good solution for Cape Cod, in my opinion. And I'm very, very concerned about the direction that is being discussed here. And I think a lot of the folks have wonderful concerns and comments, but they don't apply to Cape Cod. But anyway, I'll leave it at that because Greg has touched on a lot of these points. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much for the comments. Just looking at the next person who signed up this evening, Andrew Smith.
I do not see Andrew as an attendee right now.
Okay. Kevin Robbins.
Oh, great. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to bring attention to, what we're calling a public health crisis, and people use the word disease in order to, kind of scare people, but let's just look at the data from the CDC. And in the last 10 years, we've had 26 cases of EEE in Massachusetts. And in the last 20 years, we've had 218 cases of West Nile. So I would like, the commission and the state to really think about, what is the absolute risk to public health? And then what are these measures, what is the absolute risk reduction by using these pesticides and mosquito, mitigation plans? So in my view, the risk is really, really low, actually almost negligible, but the real risk is what we're doing to us, and the bees and the whole ecosystem. If you look at, human fertility, male fertility in particular, in the last 30 years, it's gone down by 50%. That's quite shocking. And so, we say we're protecting the kids at the camp in Cape Wellfleet, we're protecting them from disease, but really we're actually, causing disease. So we really need to think about how we use these tools and how to use them properly and when to use them. So I would just ask, really consider the risks benefit profile of these tools, and just, for instance, I live in central Massachusetts, and we get sprayed weekly in our town, and so it's constantly just checking checking the website, when are they going to spray? And often it's like, we're not going to spray now, or we're going to spray on Tuesday. It actually happens on Thursday. You sign up to not be on the list and they still spray. The truck comes screaming by. And even if you're on the list and the truck stops at our house, I mean, it's an aerosol. And just, again, to think about, this aerosol, like, it's organically derived, and, people think it's safe, but really it's not. And it's persistent. And even the metabolites are persistent, and even the metabolites are endocrine disruptors. So really, I want to bring to light, the public health, and really, eliminate the entire mosquito control program, and really put public health, number one, instead of, comfort and this, disease risk that is really, it's almost zero. Okay.
Thank you for your comments, Kevin. Chris Doyle. Christine, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Chris Doyle, and I'm commenting as a private citizen, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment. And also, I'll help you by staying well within your time limit. Generally, I support the recommendations of the task force and support codifying the recommendations in legislation. And more specifically, I support the best practice recommendation to prohibit aerial spraying of adulticides. I appreciate the important concerns from pollinators, but I'm also concerned about the accumulation of pesticides in the food chain and their impact on ecosystems, river, and other wildlife species. And finally, I think that education on managing life with mosquitoes can go a long way to mitigating the deleterious impacts of some mosquitoes. Thank you for the hard work of the task force and for the general direction of the recommendations.
Thank you for that. And now I'm going to turn it back to Caroline, who will go through the list of folks who were not on at the beginning when we first called on them. So Caroline, I will let you run us through the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you. This may be a little bit iterative. I'll read folks' name aloud and see if I can find them in the chat as we go. Apologies for any downtime while I go through this process. Dawn Ogden is the first, and I still do not see Dawn present here. Meredith O'Leary. I just still do not see Meredith present. Jennifer Brown. So Jennifer. Lynn Griesmer. Unfortunately, do not see Lynn. Richard Callahan, not here. Dr. Lisa Nagy is not here. Henry Rose is not present. Jordan McCarran is not present. Rebecca Chain is not present. Gwen Nabod is not present. Rachel Belial Toller is not present. Andrew Smith is not present. And that takes us through the list of folks that have signed up to participate in the session. Because the session is predicted to go to until 6 p.m. Beth, I defer to you if you have any closing words in the meantime, but we will stay open until 6.
I think I'll take the opportunity again to thank everyone for participating and for your feedback and the feedback that you provided here this evening, as well as what you will submit in terms of written comments and feedback. Very much appreciated. As Caroline noted, we will stay until 6 in the event that anyone else joins and requests to speak. And we will take note of that. Other than that, we will just stay silent on the line for now. If anyone else joins, we will offer them a chance to speak. But thank you all again for providing your feedback this evening, and look forward to circling back with final recommendations after the subcommittees complete their work. And again, my thanks to the subcommittee members and members of the task force for all of their work. And thank you all again for joining this afternoon and this evening.
Just gonna double check the list. Looks like Wenley Ferguson just signed up. Wenley, I can give you speaking permissions right now.
Hello all. I didn't prepare any comments on Wenley Ferguson. I work with Save the Bay in Providence, Rhode Island. Our watershed includes Mount Hope Bay, and we also worked with the Buzzards Bay Coalition. Rachel Jakuba, who just mentioned the collaboration with Bristol County Mosquito Control. I've been working with Diana Brennan's predecessor, as well as Diana, since about 2015 on a salt marsh adaptation project, restoring tidal hydrology through selected ditch maintenance, as well as installation of runnels that Rachel mentioned. This was a pilot project that we did in Broad Cove in Dighton, Massachusetts, with the Dighton Conservation Commission in the town of Dighton. It was on town land, and it had significant mosquito breeding habitat. And the mosquito control program, both through Diana's predecessor, Steve, and Diana, were instrumental in helping me with the permitting process in Massachusetts. I do similar projects in Rhode Island, working with the Rhode Island Mosquito Abatement Coordinator, Al Getman. We've been doing this work for about 10 years. So bringing this technique to Massachusetts and working with local partners at the town level has been a very positive process. And as Rachel mentioned, we just completed 2 projects in the Buzzards Bay watershed, and Diana and myself are working on another project with Mass Audubon on one of their sanctuaries, as well as with the Dartmouth Land Trust. We've also had the opportunity to meet with the Cape Cod Mosquito Control staff, as well as the Plymouth County Mosquito Control staff, to share this type of restoration technique. It's low tech, it's easy to implement, it's difficult to permit, however. So looking at ways that the regulatory structure can be, some of these projects could be more easily permitted would be certainly helpful. And our salt marshes are seeing significant degradation due to accelerated sea level rise. And they are impacted by legacy agricultural impacts from the years of haying. There's old embankments and ditches that have impacted the tidal hydrology, and the use of these shallow runnels, either digging by hand or with the low ground pressure excavators, is a technique to try to restore the tidal hydrology of these salt marshes while reducing mosquito breeding habitat and providing access to the marsh surface for mummy chugs, which feed upon the larvae. So any efforts by this group to highlight this practice as a best management practice to reduce the need for using pesticides, we would strongly recommend. And again, would love to commend the great work of the Bristol County Mosquito Control staff, both their operators as well as Diana Brennan. Thank you.
Was muted. Thank you very much, Wenley, for your comments. Just had another individual signed up, Tori Antonino. I will give you speaking permission.
Hi there, my name is Tori Antonino. I live at 65 Boston Street in Somerville. And I kind of tuned in late to this presentation listening session. So I'm a little, from what I heard, it seems that this is going to take away local municipality control over mosquito spraying. And I hope that is wrong, because here in Somerville, we're greatly reducing the amount of mosquito spraying because people are putting more and more pollinator habitat in their gardens and becoming much more aware of pesticide use. And I have not seen the effects firsthand of mosquito spraying, but people post a lot of pictures online to different groups I belong to. And, you know, it's traumatic when you see a hummingbird dying or a monarch dying, or, you know, life being, we're trying to create life in so many situations here, and it's distressing. So I don't know if you can answer that question, but that would be my concern. And of course, just education. If we can do mosquito dunks and just try to get, you know, make sure there's no standing water, and have tools for municipalities to use to educate on preventing mosquito populations from growing versus using pesticides. So I don't know if you could answer that question about municipality control, but if we have time, I would love that. And basically just reducing the amount of mosquito spraying, hopefully someday to none, is the goal for me anyway. Thank you very much, and for the work you do.
Thank you for your comments. I am not in a position to answer a question, but I strongly recommend that you attend subcommittee meetings and perhaps the next meeting of the task force, and to raise your question at that point in time.
Is there anything to read? I don't know if
the documents have been posted to the Mosquito Control Task Force webpage.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Gillian Bedine.
Hello, this is Gillian Bedine. I'm a select board member in the town of Wendell. We're a town of about 900 residents in the rural part of Massachusetts, headed towards Western Mass. And I just wanted to share a few comments about the process, and I do hope that the process will be clarified in this next go round. I was one of a few people, along with our Conservation Commission and Board of Health, who completed the application this past time. We thought we did a good job and felt that our numbers justified opting out and using other methods such as education. And we're very surprised when we were denied. We do want to make sure that the process is clearer, and that also takes into account our local environment, local situation, and opportunity to make sure that we can keep our community safe by other measures, such as things other people have spoke of, as well as safe for our environment. But I appreciate the opportunity for comments, and I will keep in touch about what happens with the subcommittees. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to check to see other individuals who have signed up. Apologies, juggling a lot of things on my screen right now. I see 2 additional names. I think we can hopefully get through those 2 individuals, and then we will likely be at 6 p.m. at that point in time. Jeannie Mooney, I just gave you speaking permissions.
Oh, yes, thank you for this opportunity. Just very quickly, I just became engaged in learning that you had this, and so I'm just joining in today and learning about this information. I wanted to just make a quick comment under local engagement under 3, where you mentioned public engagement. One of the things I didn't see here is really outreach to media and really informing media of disease risk and giving them science-based information, because I think oftentimes when there's coverage of events with mosquitoes, that I think that it can be almost a little bit, not hysterical is the wrong word, but I just wonder whether or not good science-based information and disease risk information is gotten to the people who are providing information to the public. So I would hope that that would be included, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Finally, Danielle Perry.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm Danielle Perry. I work for Mass Audubon as its Coastal Resilience Program Director, and been working with Wendy Ferguson from Save the Bay, who previously spoke, as well as Diana Brennan from Bristol County Mosquito Control on a ecological and salt marsh restoration project at Mass Audubon's Islands Pond Wildlife Sanctuary in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Just wanted to further reiterate what has previously been said about the runneling technique and how instrumental it has been in not only controlling and limiting mosquito breeding habitat, but also its important role of restoring salt marsh habitat, which also then helps to prevent further creation of mosquito breeding habitat as well. Another technique I'm wanting to bring up is also ditch remediation. So because of past agricultural purposes and of wanting to create these legacy ditches that have also shown to create mosquito breeding habitat by trapping excess water on the salt marsh itself, of being able to use a technique that is low tech, low impact, and low risk in order to fill these ditches with natural plant materials that is already on the marsh, and fill those ditches in order to remove that risk of excess water further pooling on the marsh, in addition to the risk that is happening due to sea level rise that is also causing excess water to rest on the marsh, which is again creating these mosquito breeding habitats. So wanting to further add voice to the importance of these different restoration ecological management techniques that again are very low impact, low risk, but are unfortunately very hard to permit within the state of Massachusetts, despite other success in neighboring states, in order to help solve these problems in an ecologically friendly and environmentally manageable way. So I appreciate giving the time to speak. And again, thanks so much for Diana Brennan for working with us with Bristol County Mosquito Control, and Wendy Ferguson from Save the Bay as well.
Thank you for your comments. I think with that, we are at 6 p.m. right now. I'm going to stop screen sharing. And just to echo what Undersecretary Beth Card mentioned at the end of this, we thank everyone very much for time and input to the task force and the subcommittees on the draft recommendations today. We are very much looking forward to progress of the subcommittees and the task force into the future. And we strongly encourage anyone who wishes to add commentary or add notes to submit written testimony at the Mosquito Control Task Force webpage. Thank you very much for everyone's time today, and we look forward to the work of the task force over the coming next month and a half. Thank you very much.